How different do you think you are to a Gen Z today?
Well, when we were growing up, I think it sums up the same scenario where we were not so purpose driven. To be very fair, we had very simple, basic purposes in life. Let's study well. Let's get into our careers.
Yeah.
Let's let that career be with us till we retire. To be very fair, I mean that's how we all started off. In fact, for that matter, I think how Gen Zs look at it is very, very differently for them. Careers, I don't think so. Gen Zs really look at careers which are long term because they want to create every movement now. There's a very nice word Gen Zs use called Now-ism. Now-ism, okay? Now-ism is basically it's all about the idea is now. Now is more important than tomorrow and the past.
Okay.
Now, Now-ism can be looked into a little more uniquely and a little more differently. Now-ism is not just about how Gen Zs think. I think this is the ecosystem which is creating a Now-ism, meaning I want a car now, right? I mean, everything is instant.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Brew Bytes with me, Nadeem Ibrahim. Today, we're going to get very uncomfortable about the truth of Gen Zs. It's a very hot topic. I think it's a topic that's been ongoing, certainly for my generation and generations before me, and probably even for Generation Zs themselves. My guest today, I'm very humbled that he's here with me. He's a well-seasoned media marketing guy, and even in the space of tech. He's recently written a book called And You Think You Know Gen Zs. My guest today is Asif Hussain. Welcome, Asif. How are you?
Thank you so much, Nadeem. It's a pleasure, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Alhamdulillah. Pleasure's all ours, my friend. Pleasure's all ours. Look, let's go straight into it, right? Reflecting on your own generation and Gen Zs, what do you think are the traits that Gen Zs really need to sort of pick up? Because there's a lot of conversation about Gen Zs, right? So with Gen Zs, they can often be very emotionally driven. They are very laid back, quite passive, not really as maybe driven as previous generations in some things, or at least don't showcase that. But if we were to think about your generation, my generation, that we have some unique skills, what are the traits that Gen Zs have to let go, and what are maybe the skills they need to sort of inherit from other generations?
I think it's a great question as an icebreaker, to be honest, Nadeem. Let me begin. Let's analyze what is the difference between our generation and the generation which is Gen Z at this stage. I think the difference probably was, if you remember, I would say that there were three important elements that we lived with. The first important aspect was that knowledge, the source of knowledge, was extremely centered either through books or through universities or through our parents or seniors. So there was a bit of an authority in terms of there was a power, and the power was there because there was authority in terms of the knowledge was concerned. And hence, I think whether you had a choice or you didn't have a choice, to be very fair, you used to listen to people who had the power in terms of the knowledge is concerned, right? Now, what is the difference between Gen Zs and us is Gen Zs are very exposed when it comes to power in terms of knowledge, I would say. Now, knowledge seeking can be done anywhere and everywhere, in fact, for that matter. I mean, look, the podcast itself has taken a huge spike in the Gen Zs, and the reason is because they would love to hear, listen, know, and learn from various sources. You see, there has been a shift in terms of, if I may say, in terms of the power of knowledge. Has actually moved in from a very few centric people to masses today. You can study, learn, take knowledge from everywhere. Now, having said that, that's the most important aspect where Gen Zs need to understand that power is important, but not everything. Right?
True.
Most important thing is how to use knowledge in the right way is very important. Now, there are two important aspects I would say. I like Gen Zs. Let's begin there.
Yeah.
I like Gen Zs because they are disruptive, they're bold. Let me rephrase it in a different way, that they are ready to experiment. They're ready to ask questions, which are conventional. They like to go beyond their thought processes and do something different in the world. I think this is the major difference. And the most important difference comes from is purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I think Gen Zs are very purposeful driven. They
Okay.
like purpose in life. They like purpose in their education. They like purpose in their careers. They like purpose in relationship, in fact, for that matter. I have interviewed a lot of Gen Zs
I'm
when I was
sure.
writing my book.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you know that I'm also an adjunct faculty at a university. So I obviously
Mhm.
interact with a lot of Gen Zs. And what amazes me about Gen Zs is they're very intriguing. They're very bold. At the same time, they like to ask the right questions because they are very, very, very purpose driven.
Mhm.
I mean, the same we see in the marketing front today.
Mhm.
Brands are basically more accepted by Gen Zs who are purpose driven brands.
Okay.
They're very, very conscious about environment, carbon emission, in fact, for that matter.
Mhm.
And I think this is what I would want. This is what I would learn from Gen Zs, to be
Yeah.
very fair.
Oh.
I think we were not, or I was not questioning too many things about brands or society at large, but I think this young generation of Gen Z are definitely doing that.
I think for maybe our generations, we were kind of instilled with knowledge, and that ability to discover information was very limited. We barely had the internet, barely had mobile phones. So you were relying on what your peers or, the father in the house or the uncle would be, telling you and, teaching you, and you would think that is right. And very little did you have that. But I think there's also like a social criteria to it as well. Different cultural levels of respect that if somebody is telling you something to empower you, then you almost accept that as a status quo and you don't question it, right?
Absolutely.
And I think you're right. When I think of even my own nephews who are Gen Zs, they question a lot. But they also have a different drive of motivation. I, at the age of 16, was so anxious and eager to drive a car. Don't see many Gen Zs actually that eager now to drive a car. In my teenage years, the trend was buy a car and then change the face of the car, change the technology inside the car with music entertainment and things like this, and then just have fun with the car. I don't see many of those fun cars on the roads nowadays. When I think of my time in the UK, Dubai is very different. Don't get me wrong, Dubai is completely different.
Absolutely.
But I think the attitude, they have a different outlook of, as you say, I like that word of purpose. They have a sense of purpose. They know sort of what they want, but so long it caters towards their needs, then they won't necessarily question any further other than that. So it's quite interesting. Although I feel often Gen Zs have an emotional imbalance, right? I don't know if it's just a generational thing, and as generations go on, it will become a lot more regular. I would think to say, if that's the right word to be using for it. But I do think that they are atypical because millennials, Gen X's, and previous ones, very similar. I think you're right. It all comes down to technology. Technology will change how you behave. If we omit the technology we have and the internet, I think we will act and behave how we were before. So our behaviors would be, playing sports outside, cycling a bike, all these things, right?
Absolutely.
We see none of these now. We see it's all about the digital fingers now, and how they keep processing. Just want to ask, like, when you were growing up, think of your teenage years, and how different do you think you are to a Gen Z today?
Well, when we were growing up, I think it sums up the same scenario where we were not so purpose driven, to be very fair.
Mm.
We had very simple, basic purposes in life. Let's study well. Let's get into our careers.
Yeah.
Let's let that career be with us till we retire, to be very fair. I mean, that's how we all started off, in fact, for that matter. I think how Gen Zs look at it is very, very differently for them. Careers, I don't think so. Gen Zs really look at careers which are long term because they want to create every movement now. There's a very nice word Gen Zs use called Now-ism. Now-ism.
Okay.
Okay. Now-ism is basically, it's all about the idea is now. Now is more important than tomorrow and the past.
Okay.
Now, Now-ism can be looked into a little more uniquely and a little more differently. Now-ism is not just about how Gen Zs think. I think this is the ecosystem which is creating a Now-ism, meaning I want a car now.
Right.
Right? I mean, everything is instant. You want food, you order food. If it's 20 minutes late, it's delayed beyond a point for them.
Freak out,
right?
yeah.
The whole idea of you using your best of the devices, whether it's a mobile phone or laptops or whatever you use, you need speed today. You need everything, you need everything on a fingertip, right, at this stage. And that's Now-ism is enveloped in their life. Everything is now, right now. So if a car brand today tells me that they're going to deliver the car for in the next 6 months, probably I would accept it, to be very fair. I would still want to wait for it, right? I would still like to wait for it. I'm a Gen X, right? But I'm not too sure whether you're Gen Z, if you tell him that, oh, look, you got to wait for a vehicle for the next 6 months or 7 months, they're not willing to wait because the whole idea is it's instant. Now, that brings to another topic, that what do they need to change or learn from the other generations? I think two important aspects brings in here. And the first most important aspect, which I would feel that they need to really learn is, yes, purpose is important. Speed is important. Everything is important in life. But at the same time, they need to emphasize on patience. They need to learn patience. And I see attention span, as we all know of Gen Zs, is a little lesser than the other generations. And I think they're quite curious and have a lot of anxiety about success too early. And for that matter of fact, because they've seen their friends or their colleagues growing tremendously. I mean, for me, a career, there was an organic career growth. And today, I've seen for Gen Zs, there have been Gen Zs which have become millionaires at the age of 16 years, 17 years, 18 years. They've done their startups. They've got that successful. And I've seen Gen Zs, after being successful, being bankrupt as well.
Oh, wow.
Right. So I think there's just too much happening at a very fast pace. And the whole intention for Gen Z is to demand, I think Now-ism is what we said, that they want everything now, they want success, they want everything right away. I think that's something which Gen Z needs to learn from the others. And the second most important thing is they have to understand the importance of experience.
Okay. Experience in what
experiences
context?
Of life, experience
traveling.
of everything for that matter. And that goes back to us, because when we were growing up, we respected our seniors, our parents, our teachers, our bosses, our seniors, and everyone because of their experience, because we know they have an experience now, right? But I think the Gen Z says that, look, I mean, I'll create my experiences.
You don't need to tell me. I'll do it myself. Unfortunately, they need to sort of learn and make their own mistakes, right? But it's like any teenager, though, no? Or do you think it's quite unique for Gen Zs itself?
I think Gen Zs, well, teenagers normally do have that kind of character, but the Gen Zs are more anxious, as I mentioned.
Irrespective of their age, you think there's always going to be the same.
And I see that anxiety in everything, in fact, for that matter. I see that anxiety in their careers as well. I see that anxiety in studies as well, for that matter. They don't want to organically grow in their careers as well. To be honest, let me give you an example. Recently, I got really shocked with a student coming to me and asking me a very straight question. All right. And he says, look, that was a question which kind of shocked me, right? And the question was that, hey, you know what? I have a question in my mind going on for some time. I've seen a lot of young startup entrepreneurs who have not really gone a traditional university degree.
Okay.
I said, okay, that's a great question. So what's your question actually? Sorry. So he's saying, yeah, so do you think traditional studies hampers your growth or becoming an entrepreneur?
Okay.
I said, wow.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
so
yeah.
that's their analysis, in terms of, where you want to invest time in education institutes, 5 years, 6 years, 10 years after your school, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And where's it leading to? Or can we go straight away to startups and create our experiences, learn from the business world? And I think that brings to our another topic in there is that, are institutes ready or equipped
Yeah.
enough for this generation?
Well, before we go into that, I was reading a stat. I'm still trying to accept that this stat is actually correct. It's from Common Sense Media of 2023. And they claim that children spend almost 7.5 hours of screen time outside of school daily. I don't even know if there's 7.5 hours outside of that. But even if you were to half that, that's still quite significant. Even 3.5 hours is significant. And in your book, you wrote about Gen Z's grown up in immersed technology. Now, when does it cross from being digital native to digital dependent?
Well, I so like a question there,
Mm.
Let's understand who made them digital dependent. All
Parents,
right. Is
I'd say.
everyone.
Yeah,
In fact,
true, true,
it's
true.
parents. Remember, I mean, it starts from a very, very adolescent, very, very young age where you want to feed a toddler, you give him or her a
Tablet.
mobile phone. It
Mm.
starts from there, right? And it never ends, right? And I don't think so. We need to blame anyone for it, because the fact remains that, can we live without digital today, or can we live without devices for that matter today? You go to a school, the first thing they give you is a
Tablet
is
now.
a tablet,
Yeah, true.
and they need to study on a tablet. The school syllabus, everything today is on a tablet today. So I think, if the source of information or knowledge for them in schools is through devices, how can we take them away at their leisure time or when they are home? And let's not forget, there is a world existing for a Gen Z, which is online, right?
Mm-hmm,
It's
mm-hmm.
social,
Gaming, I guess.
gaming. I mean, what can we say about gaming? I mean,
Yeah.
gaming is life for them, right? So gaming is important for them. And gaming is, to be very fair, it's an important aspect of their personality now. I mean, that's what research says, and the kind
Mm-hmm.
of games a Gen Z plays, that portrays and creates and builds his character. So you got to
Okay.
be. I mean, gaming is no longer just about entertainment.
No.
It's also an expression for them in terms of how they think, how they build, how they react, how they
Definitely.
respond. So looking at now, there's another challenge in here, right? Because their communication is purely virtual today,
Yeah, it so is.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And they're going away from human communications in a way. In a way, I mean, not generalizing everyone, but I would say that I'm sure everybody would really start realizing that when
Mm-hmm.
we speak to Gen Zs, they're a little more non-communicative, they're a little more shy. And there's a chapter which I've written in the book which says, give me my space. I
Okay.
mean, the whole idea is Gen Zs feel that they need their space. The space idea comes from a lot of sciences which goes into it, because the fact remains the virtual world creates and develop your mind differently
Mm.
than your human interaction.
Okay.
Currently, when you're talking to me today, Brian, you're talking to me. Your eyes are talking to me. Your face is talking to me. I mean, the entire body is actually communicating to me.
Yeah.
I mean, we're the only being in the universe given the ability to converse and talk,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're the only living creature in the universe ability of talking, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we're
Mm-hmm.
communicating to human race.
Yes,
This is
yes.
a very important element.
Okay.
Now imagine what we've done with our human race,
But
that talking to each other, we're now, instead of face to
we're
face,
digitizing
in
the whole thing,
person,
right?
we're taking that into a
Mm. I
digital
mean, it was even
space.
very difficult during COVID when everything was online. I could not do it. I needed to be back here physically with. I just was going mad. Look, I find that so interesting where you talk about, how they want their own space. It, but I also look at the schooling system and whether or not the schooling system is just reacting to how Gen Zs behave, or are they helping Gen Zs to think for the bigger world?
I always say that one of the industries which could have evolved better and is evolving at a very slow pace is the education industry across the world, and it's across the globe, in fact. Now, mind you, a lot of people will say, "Oh, technology has moved into the education industry," but those are gadgets and smart screens and monitors and all of those. I'm not referring to that technology which has moved into the education industry. I'm referring to there's been zero changes happening in terms of the way we impart knowledge to our generation next. And this generation, as we discussed earlier, has got information. What is the point in giving them more information, right? I mean, I can probably have the same information online, and you're going to be think probably the same way. In fact, I would want to learn it more interestingly on online, in fact, for that matter.
Well, this is the thing. Like, I think schools are maybe. I mean, this is a statement that I probably get a lot of evil eyes on. I have some teachers in my own family and my own set of friends, but I'm not sure if schools are misunderstanding Gen Zs in what their learning preferences are. Because you're absolutely right on the button when you talk about they want their own space. They like flexible working, for example. Now, you apply that flexible working in the working environment, professional environment, you somewhat need to sort of bring that into a school environment. Now, does schooling need to change? Not from like a 9 to 3. Does it need to be a bit more flexible in some respects that adapts to a grown behavior? And I think maybe Gen Zs are very atypical to Gen Alphas. Still to be seen. My son's a Gen Alpha, and you know, I like to think right now he's got my traits of what I am like. Yeah, asking and saying, okay, I understand. But if he was to become a Gen Z, I don't know where I would be. I think I would be quite lost. So I think schools are probably somewhat not understanding the behaviors of Gen Zs and how the school, like, I think you're so spot on, where maybe schools have not adapted to what Gen Zs are, but also from technology perspective. Talk about teaching. In the place of I was at an event in Aula almost 2 years ago, and I forgot his name, but he was a well-renowned author, and he was giving a talk about Gen Zs at that time. And what he had said was he was giving a speech in the US, and he was talking about Gen Zs getting ready for the bigger world of work. It was like one of those career things, right? And he said, as he was talking, one Gen Z, and I'm not sort of stereotyping Gen Zs, okay, but there was a member in the crowd, and she put her hand up and she says, I don't care where I work or how I work. If I don't have what I need in a place of work, I will go somewhere else. So the obligation to work is not quite instilled in their mind. The fact that they have this freedom to be able to go from one to another and feel that it's about their purpose that should be in a place of work absolutely stands to be true. From a teaching perspective, I know I'm going on a bit now, is in the space of education where I think schools could adapt is they don't want to be maybe in a classroom for 1 hour on a subject. Their attention span is so different and they're very digital focused. So what is it that they could do? They could sit in a class, switch on for 5 minutes, switch off, switch on again for the last 5 minutes, and okay, I'm going to go home. I'm going to go into a Gemini or a Chat GPT to learn more about my subject that I just I was disengaged with. That's a threat, surely, right?
Absolutely. But the fact remains, we as education institutes should not focus now, as I mentioned to you, imparting knowledge any longer, because that's not important, that's not interesting. What can be done is more practical knowledge is what Gen Zs really need and they want. I'll give you some practical instances.
Sure.
One of the students said that, hey, why do we have examinations, in fact, for that matter? If you have examinations, very, very stereotype examinations, why do we have them? Why don't you give us an assignment, real world assignment, and tell us, hey, you know what? Create a marketing project and allow us to be graded accordingly, because they're saying, look, theory, I can memorize it, but that does not give me the set skills to actually work in a regular environment in them. And I'm talking about a school student who's claiming this. I'm not even talking about a university student who's claiming it. So a school student today feels that he needs more practical knowledge, in fact. And I really like, the whole idea is this typical idea of being in a school for so many hours definitely needs to be changed, because you're confining them and they don't like to be confined, whether it's a physical space, locking them in a classroom and forcing them to, learn certain subjects in a very confined environment is something which Gen Zs don't really like, in fact, for that matter.
For sure.
Yeah, so I think that the whole approach of education needs to be a little more practical, a little more experiential, in fact, for that matter of time. Like when you're teaching subjects which are marketing, of course, they're much easier, but maybe subjects which are more tougher, like science, and I think they need to be a little more practical, more real, more related to how am I going to utilize it. If you're teaching from, let's say, from the business point of view, you're teaching somebody content writing, for example, right? Don't teach them just content writing. Teach them how do you market that content writing services, in fact, for that matter of time. So I think the whole idea is to not have a very set syllabus. I don't know when these syllabus were created, to be honest. Nothing. When I actually see in the universities, or syllabus were created, like, I don't know. 1974 probably. And there has been changes in the syllabus, but not drastic.
Not major changes, right?
No major changes. And
still the same with teaching.
No. And the sad story is there are people like us who would want to teach them for the sake of finishing a syllabus, because that's what the universities are asking you to do so. And that's where the real challenge comes. So the entire idea and the purpose should be more about learning, because Gen Zs want to really learn rather than absorbing knowledge for the sake
told, right?
Of exactly.
Don't
so I
talk
think
to me. Let me understand it more.
Let me understand them. And the most important aspect, and I've kind of experimented that in my class as well.
Yeah.
So let's assume this is a 30 minutes class, and your conversation percentage should be maximum 10 minutes.
Okay, wow.
I would say maximum 15 minutes. But the 15 minutes of pure interaction allow them to study their way. And you'd be surprised to know that they can bring in better insights to theories, strategies than even probably we can. They're very creative.
Okay.
They learn, they have the knowledge, the source of information, and I think they can be more creative. So what we need to do is we need to, instead of giving knowledge, we need to create environments. This is what I'm emphasizing on. The idea of a typical session where I'm going to be talking about the next 30 minutes, the idea is, let me listen to you for the next 15, 20 minutes. And I'm telling you, that learning is more impactful, because when a student is expressing, learning, narrating, researching, and then learning on its own. The whole idea is, today, students need mentorship. They don't need teaching.
Okay.
The teaching, I think, should go away at some point of time. The traditional teaching methodology of delivering a session to our students, I think, needs to go away some point of time. It should be mentoring and coaching. Another important thing, they learn more from their peers than they learn from their seniors.
Okay.
And the same logic applies in the career world as well. I've been talking to a lot of seniors, CEOs in the advertising space today, and I'm meeting them. A lot of them, probably you must have seen my post up there.
I have, quite a lot.
And in fact, almost, I don't know. I've met a lot of CEOs, and I think the basic difference is that when Gen Zs work, they like the work buddy culture. They don't respect hierarchies because they don't believe in them. They feel, even as an intern, the intern says that I'm an intern and I'm an important aspect and a part of your organization. So they demand that kind of a respect and a status quo,
Mhm.
which is very important. So I think the organizations also need to understand the typical hierarchy positions might
Yeah,
change.
I agree. There was a research done on LinkedIn which said like 67% of Gen Zs prioritize work-life balance over salary. Wow, something. In Dubai,
Absolutely.
you'll be struggling, right? Work-life balance over salary, okay? Usually people come to this region for the opposite side of things, right? And also to have a healthy work-life balance. It gives you both. Actually, it gives you both. But are Gen Zs then, would you say, redefining work ethics in a place of work?
Well, they're redefining their ethics to be very fair.
Or
So
they just
once
like kicking it
again,
out and say, I don't care.
I mean, once again, I think it's purpose-driven work culture, what they're aiming for.
Because I say this, I've interviewed a few Gen Zs in my lifetime. And I have to say, it's been quite of an experience of an interview. I had one where this person was very much laid back like this and was very passive with his answers. And even to a point was sort of doing this. I know you can't see it if you listen to this, but literally the body language was so all over that in my time when I used to go for a job interview, I'd be so nervous, first of all, going into the job interview.
True.
And I would be having like 10 questions at the end, whereby the interviewer would say, I've only got time for 2 or 3 questions, by the way. We don't have enough time now. Whereas the Gen Zs don't come up with any questions and they almost say, so yeah, when do I start? Like, it's not like a sense of entitlement, right? They just behave so differently. And I say that because I think employers need to learn or unlearn our old models of how we connect better with Gen Zs, right?
I completely agree with that. Yeah, I mean, we need to attract them, convince them,
Convince them, yeah.
rather than they being convinced whether this organization is the right organization, right? So it's the other way around. I mean, they want us to prove that, look, you're hiring me, dude. So you convince me
Convince me,
that this
exactly.
job
Is right for
is
me
right
and
for
is the right
me,
place for me.
and
You're
this is the
almost
right
having to
place.
sell them the job.
Absolutely.
Even though they want the job, you have to sell the job.
You have to sell the job. Exactly my point. there.
Again, it comes down to purpose again, right?
It comes into purpose as well. And I think that they have the job insecurity. I don't know. I mean, this generation doesn't really know what is job insecurity because they don't care
You don't care.
about job insecurity. In fact,
I mean, we are really not meaning to bash Gen Zs. They are, a very, very important part of the working capital of any economy. They're the future of the economy we live in, and they're the future for our even children's children as well, of how they set things up. And so we're not at all bashing them in any way or form.
Absolutely.
We're just critiquing certain elements of it. And I'm sure we could spend time about millennials and, Gen X's. We all have our own flaws and things like this. I think what's exciting is that is a new sense of energy of another generation that has completely transformed because they are digital natives. We were not digital natives. We were inheriting digital, right? We didn't grow up with it. And it's a big, big difference. In the space of consumers for a minute now, when we think of Gen Zs now, and you mentioned purpose, what really drives a Gen Z loyalty for a brand?
I think the first important aspect is for a Gen Z, it's important that the brand is ethical. And that's ethical.
Ethical, yeah.
Ethical is the number one priority because that's also linked with purpose.
Yeah, okay.
Ethical in terms of to its people, ethical to society, ethical as a product, and ethical claim to a consumer as well. So ethics is number one when it comes to Gen Z today, and that's why we see that they're not brand loyal the way we used to be.
You stick with one brand and you're happy with that brand. You continue with that brand, right?
Right. And I think they're not they're brand conscious. Let's not forget that they are brand conscious, and not that they're not brand conscious, but for them, a brand has to also satisfy the other important elements which they look into a brand. So, for example, a very, very famous brand, I wouldn't name them, but let's assume that there's a brand Z, and the brand Z is famous, doing well, it's been there, it's got heritage, 100 years. It has to prove today for a Gen Z. It doesn't care whether it has proved itself for the last 100 years. It has to prove today.
The
And
whole
that's,
Now-ism analogy,
the
right? that you
Now-ism
bring.
technology. Yeah, the idea of Now-ism is right there. So the idea for the consumer front is, I think Gen Zs they're honest. They like honest communication as well.
But do you think they've created, based on this lack of loyalty, I was about to say disloyalty, which is very not the right word to use, but this lack of loyalty then, moving from brand to brand. And to be fair, we have seen new brands come up thanks to Gen Zs, right? Small blue chip brands who have become very prominent now. But is there a sense of a cancel culture by Gen Zs that I can just chop and choose wherever I want to?
The cancel. I mean, I mean, there are two aspects of Gen Zs when you talk about the cancel culture. One is linked to a brand being ethical. If the brand is not ethical in whatever sense they would want to take market, they're very outspoken, easy, simple, and cancel a brand. It's simple as that for them. They don't want to waste too much of time in dwelling into brand loyalty and and all of that. They're very simple about it. However, is it abused at some point of time? I do feel it is abused, because you need to. The problem is the young Gen Zs don't give enough time to anything, whether it's brand, it's experience, it's jobs, it's careers. They need to find a bit of how do I say it? They have to take some time. That's where the challenge comes. I mean, they're not willing to wait. It's they want to they arrive at the conclusions too early. And that is something which I believe will come with experience, and I'm sure will come with experience. I think, yeah.
Moving on to, I think, some controversial outlooks of Gen Zs, I would say, or maybe an in-look at them. Mental health and well-being is a big part of their life. We didn't really cover that right now. And with that, very controversial, I'm about to say, is it a disguise for responsibility when it comes to mental health or well-being? Let's say well-being, not mental, because I think they're very different. Well-being in itself. So you go in a place of work, we've been talking about flexible working, we've been talking about having like lazy booths, somewhere you can go and relax and do meditation, all this stuff. It's a very, very different culture, right? To service your well-being. And I'm all up for well-being. I do a lot of sports. I used to do yoga, and I'm all about it. That's one of my number one priorities in life, is to be very connected and in your mind here. But kind of often been seen as just like scapegoat of responsibility.
I don't. I
or
think,
am I just being a bit outdated with that judgment? Like,
no, you're not. I mean, so obviously here we are generalizing the entire cult of the Gen Zs,
yeah,
but
it's true.
the fact remains that one thing which I've learned from them, the Gen Z generation, is the importance they're giving for the overall well-being, and I think that's very important as well. The times we're living in, Nadeem, is we're living in a times where everything is too digitalized, too easy for that matter. At the same time, relationships are more complicated or complex than it used to be before. It all comes back to the same thing. You had authorities. You had you used to have an authority to the family member. There was this head of the family, and all of that. Gender biasness and all of those. The real world of today is away from a lot of those challenges out. today there's a lot of gender equality in
Mhm.
relationships and partnerships when it comes to for Gen Zs in terms of jobs. We discussed
Yep.
how they like to be treated as equal.
Mhm.
But all that, it's important that they have to take care of their, because everything does not exactly go the way they want it. So let's understand from that side
Mhm.
of the story here. They consist 30% of the population of Gen Z, probably globally, if I'm not wrong with my number. It's about 30%.
Okay.
Now you see they're dealing with 70%
Yeah.
of people who probably want to understand them, but they don't fully understand them.
Mhm.
This is where I think mental health being or health
Yeah.
in general is important for them. And I don't think so it's a disguise, because I'm seeing there are a lot of benefits for Gen Zs to kind of give importance to, for example, mental health for that
Mhm.
matter.
Mhm.
If you're not happy in a job, you are not successful in a job as well,
True.
right? Success for them does not mean that they're doing great and they've got those promotions they wanted, or it's the right organization to be in terms of its name, in terms of its. I think for them, Gen Zs look at a very overall perspective, an amazing perspective, in fact, for that matter, is the overall well being
Mhm.
in my workspace as well. And I think it's the right demand, to be very fair. I mean, given a choice, we would all want to have that kind of an environment, whether I can have a work-life balance, I have enough time for me to detox, I have enough
Mm.
time for me to go to my gym, I have got enough time, I have a hybrid if I need, if I can work from home, if I can work from any other country, I
Yep.
can work from from my home country for a few hours. I think these demands overall are healthy, and they're creating a better culture. So I think one good thing I like about Gen Zs are
Mhm.
they're creating a culture.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
And it's a
that's,
great culture.
yeah. And they've also brought a lot of, I would say, topics to the surface of well-being, mental health, sustainability, like a lot of good, important things. And look, the attitude is awesome when it comes to those types of things. But what would happen if we were to pull Gen Zs off social media for a year?
Wow.
Will they thrive, or do you think they would just collapse?
Well, initially, I think it's going to be,
Because I can't
I don't
imagine
know.
it.
I can't imagine, to be
You can't
very fair.
imagine, right?
I can't imagine.
No,
Um, but very tough, in fact, for that matter. I don't think so. They would,
because it's so connected.
they're so connected. I mean, their life, I mean, they don't know other way.
Mm.
There's no other way, to be honest, right? Can you imagine a Gen Z not being connected virtually for even 3 days, for that matter? So, to getting them off socially connected for a year means, I don't know.
It's a brilliant
Can't
detox.
imagine.
I'm sure someone will do that at some point. I mean, yeah. I mean, I was speaking to someone recently who's going to be part of this show, and he was saying in the automotive industry, what they're finding is with Gen Zs is they're actually rebelling against EV cars. They're swaying more towards retro, petrol and gear sticks and the old ways with a balance of tech. So they want the retro aspect with tech. So this is where I guess EV completely being EV doesn't make sense for them. They want that balance. So they want that. It's a great thing you mentioned about purpose. They want this purpose of being able to drive the car for the car, what the car is, but they also want it to be sustainable in some respects. So how do you bring these both together now with an engine, right? And this is where they are disconnected from what we would assume completely battery-powered vehicles would be great for them, but clearly it's not. There's a gap, there's a void that's being created there. But then you have to sort of look to celebrate Gen Z's emotional intelligence, right? I feel that there has been this perception that we're enabling their fragility, right? That they are fragile, generation. They are fragile in some respects, but we should really sort of compliment and applaud them for their emotional intelligence. It's so different than what we are, because without that emotional intelligence, we wouldn't see those subject matters that have been brought before us in the last decade, done our generations and generations before, thanks to technology that's allowed them to explore, to question, to discover, and bring it back. So I would most likely celebrate Gen Zs of what they're doing is somewhat right, rather than say they're a very difficult bunch to deal with, because we all have our traits.
No, of course, they're not very difficult to deal with, to be very honest. In fact, they're very easy to deal with, the way I look at things. Like, for example, in the last 10 years, I've realized one important aspect is if you know how to deal with them, I think they're the most easiest generation ever, for that matter.
Okay.
They're the most easiest generation ever, for that matter. And I'll be
Nice.
very brutally honest to you on that. The reason why I say that is if you mentor them and make them believe that nobody is above anyone,
Yep.
and we are here to understand, listen, and go through this together.
Yep.
That's a buzzword for them. Let's go through it together. That's a buzzword for them.
We should have a chat show on this one. Get all Gen Zs to call in and speak to Mr. Asif here on all things. The guy's a mentor. Look, Asif, we're coming towards the end of our show, and I have one segment. It's just a bit of fun here, okay?
Yeah.
Where I present 2 cards.
Okay.
And beneath each card, there's a question. One question is left by a previous guest.
Okay.
I don't know what it is, to be honest with you. I just let them write it and then just put it in the box. So it could be controversial. So brace yourself, okay? And the other one is a question that I have written up thanks to AI. Okay. I'm going to put these here. You get to choose one.
Okay.
And I just need to mix it up a bit. There's only 2 cards to mix up, but yes.
All right.
Oh, you're going for this one. Okay. So it's a question that's been written for you in ChatGPT. Okay.
All right.
This one would have been, okay. It's an interesting one. I think this one was left by Stephen King.
Wow.
From Middlesex University.
Okay.
This
that's
one
amazing.
you could have had.
Oh, Lord. Okay.
So the question
Let me talk to the AI.
If Gen Z built a tech startup based purely on their attitude towards life, what problem would it solve? And what problem would it ignore on purpose?
Wow, that's an interesting question. If they have to build a startup, I think the startup would be about solving a very important aspect of their human life, which is easing off their communication with their parents.
With their parents?
Okay. Because I think that's the and parents parents predominantly. And what they would want to leave is they would like to leave being too opinionated about what they do in terms of work. So I think they don't like too much of opinions. They want to figure it out their way. They want to fail their way. They want to succeed their way. I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure.
I mean, I don't know if AI would accept that answer, but I think he would say, okay, that's a reasonable answer somehow. I think if they were to set up a tech startup, I have no idea. I genuinely have no idea. You're almost thinking like in advance, like if I was to think of Gen Alpha, what would they tech startup be? I can't see that fast forward. I can't see that far forward, to be honest with you. Asif, thank you so much for coming on the show and helping us cut through the noise of Gen Zs and getting under the skin of Gen Zs. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I think for anyone who's looking to hire, teach, or mentor, try and get a copy of Asif's book, And You Think You Know Gen Zs. It's a very great place to sort of go for guidance and mentorship. And if you've taken anything from this show, please give it a like. Otherwise, subscribe, share, and until next time, peace out.